She posts smiling photos, attends parties with friends, and wears a radiant facade as if everything has passed. A new haircut, cryptic captions, even the shadow of another man at her side. Every sign points to her having moved on. But often, what we show the world is merely a veil for the quiet battles we fight within. Because in that moment, when night falls, when the phone stops lighting up, when laughter fades and she is left alone in a room with herself, you return, not as a lingering memory, but as something unresolved. She may try to convince herself that it's over, but the human heart does not yield to reason. And if your presence was once marked by calm and steadiness, then chances are you still dwell in some quiet corner of her mind. And now, it is time we confront the question: why does she think of you more than she dares to admit? 1. Silence is a form of communication. To many, silence may appear as an end, a withdrawal, or simply a sign of indifference. But to one who understands the human psyche and observes with awareness, silence is not absence. It is communication in a different form, one that does not rely on words. In the bond between two people who once shared deep connection, especially when emotions remain unspoken, silence often signals an inner struggle. When a woman chooses silence, it does not mean she has let go completely. On the contrary, silence often reveals the intensity of unresolved emotions. One who feels nothing has no need for silence. They simply no longer think of you. But one who is trying to suppress feeling often turns to silence as a way to control the inner chaos. She doesn't message, she doesn't engage, she doesn't mention you, not because you're gone from her mind, but because she's trying not to let you occupy too much of it. That silence is not empty. It holds countless layers of meaning that, without calmness, we easily overlook. A name deleted from the contacts list, a message typed and erased, a glance at your social media followed by a quiet exit. These are all forms of silent communication. Such actions speak to your continued presence in her inner world, even if she won't admit it out loud. A Stoic man does not react hastily to silence. He does not rush to fill the void with messages, explanations, or attempts to pull her back. For he understands that silence is sometimes necessary. It allows emotions to settle. It grants space for each to face themselves. In stillness, we are forced to look within. And if he once left something profound in her soul, then it is in these wordless moments that it will surface most clearly. Unlike anxious waiting, the Stoic man does not look to a message to affirm his worth. He knows that all things unfolding in silence do so for a reason. If she chooses not to reach out, it may stem from an inner conflict she's not yet ready to face. And if he continues to live in alignment with his values, calm, honest, unwavering, then no words are needed for him to remain present in her mind. In relationships once rooted in deep spiritual connection, sudden silence is rarely a simple act. It is not random. Behind the cutoff lies a web of emotions, hurt, fear, regret, or a lack of courage to continue the dialogue. Silence becomes a way to shield the self, yet it is also proof the heart is still active. One who truly no longer cares has no use for silence. They have already left in both reason and emotion. But the conflicted heart turns to silence to avoid confronting what it cannot yet control. Silence in a relationship, when viewed through the lens of clear awareness, is a vital phase. It is a time for recalibration, a space where each can reflect on their own behavior and emotions without being influenced by the other's reaction. In Stoicism, this is the moment to practice emotional discipline. No haste, no reaction, no fear-driven choice. Enduring presence comes not from invading another's space, but from mastering one's own. When a man resists insecurity, when he refrains from acting just to feel seen, he becomes different. She may not grasp this immediately, but in time, it is precisely this calm that leaves an impression. In a world where most respond impulsively to every emotional trigger, the one who remains silent and observant becomes unforgettable. And when she reflects, the silence you didn't break becomes the loudest statement of who you are. Silence, therefore, not merely the absence of speech. It is a deliberate choice, an act of emotional and relational awareness. The Stoic man does not see silence as an enemy, but as a necessary part of understanding. He does not fear losing someone over a stretch of quiet, for he knows that relationships worth keeping do not fall apart because of a few days without messages. And if the bond runs deep, then silence itself becomes the bridge that brings them back together, not through apology, but through the recognition of each other's true worth. 2. You are not a memory. You are a feeling. When a woman remembers someone, what she recalls isn't necessarily a sequence of events, but the feeling she experienced in those moments. Memory, by nature, is a collection of images, words, and occurrences. But feeling runs deeper. It's a state someone brings, an energy that can't be measured, yet is stored in the body, the reflexes, and the mind's unguarded moments. You may have once appeared in old photographs, quiet evenings, or a song replayed on the radio. But what makes her pause is not the image. It's the peace or connection you once carried with you. Memories can fade, but a feeling, if deep enough, leaves a lasting imprint. A man may be mentioned in passing stories, but the one who leaves a deep feeling shows up in nameless, wordless, and unforeseen moments. You don't need to act or appear for her to remember you. The feeling you left reveals itself through unconscious responses, a quickened heartbeat at the sound of an old song, a brief silence when someone unknowingly echoes your words. These moments are not deliberate, yet they hold truth. And that truth can't be denied, because it doesn't lie in speech, but in emotion. In a relationship that once held depth, connection transcends language. She may not recall every message you sent, but she remembers how it felt to be heard without judgment. She might forget the gifts, but still feel the safety she knew beside you. You became an experience, not a string of actions, but a state of presence. And once that feeling is imprinted, it lives on, somewhere in the subconscious, waiting to resurface in an unguarded moment. The difference between memory and feeling lies also in how they persist. Memories can be reshaped, altered with time, influenced by present emotion. But primal feelings, the ones etched into body and mind, are hard to counterfeit. When she tries to forget you, the memory might be replaced with new images. But the feeling of being with you, if it ever touched the truest part of her, remains and returns when no one else brings that same depth. This is why she may be with someone new, yet feels something is missing. Not because the new person is lacking, but because the old feeling hasn't been erased. That feeling didn't come from your efforts to impress. It came from how you lived, from your calm, from the quiet strength you radiated, before she even knew how much she needed it. In the silence of night, when the world's noise fades, the old feeling often returns most clearly. That's when all defenses fall and raw emotions rise to the surface. She may not say your name, may not seek you out, yet she feels a specific absence no one else seems to fill. Not because you were grand, but because you showed up in a way that made her feel seen, understood, and unburdened. You didn't leave your mark through noise. You left something through stillness. And that's why your presence doesn't take the shape of memory, easily named, easily replaced, but that of a feeling, hard to define, harder to erase. And when she cannot explain why she still hasn't fully let go, the reason lies there. You're not part of her past. You are the feeling that once made her whole. And a feeling, once it touches the deepest part of the human soul, becomes something that cannot be replicated. 3. Composure is a timeless form of magnetism. In today's world, where people are easily swept up in the pace of social media, quick reactions, impulsive words, and instant actions seem to be the norm. But within that chaos, composure stands out more than ever. Not because it demands attention, but because it's rare. The one who maintains calm in a frenzied world doesn't just stand apart. They earn trust effortlessly. Composure isn't silence, nor is it indifference. It's a state of being. When a person is not ruled by fleeting emotions, not shaken by external noise, and doesn't react mechanically to circumstances, composure signals self-mastery. And that mastery is what radiates lasting attraction. A woman may not notice it at first, but over time, in moments of pressure or uncertainty, composure reveals its true worth. While others panic, perform, or try to impress, the calm one generates a kind of gravity others want to lean into. In a relationship once marked by genuine connection, if the man remains steady through the storm, that very steadiness becomes the most enduring imprint on her mind. Composure has the power to shift the energy in a room. When someone holds inner stillness, he doesn't need words to influence. His presence alone eases the space around him. That can't be faked, and it can't be manufactured externally. It's the product of inner discipline. And once a woman has experienced it, she will feel the contrast in every future presence. What makes composure timeless is that it doesn't rely on age, appearance, or circumstance. When a calm man enters a room, eyes don't immediately turn his way, as if he's the center of gravity. But in time, people notice he's the only one not caught in the frenzy, and that sets him apart. In memory, loud gestures fade, but one who stood with quiet strength becomes an enduring landmark. To the woman who once walked away, the man's composure isn't something she sees right away. But when she returns to herself, when new relationships fail to offer the same emotional grounding, she gradually senses the value of the one who never needed to prove anything, only to be wholly himself. That stillness becomes a silent benchmark, whether she wants it or not. Composure also signals maturity. It shows that a man is no longer driven by the urge to control or be validated. He does not react to be acknowledged, nor perform to be retained. He lives by his own principles, and that makes him hard to forget. The woman may be gone, but each time she meets someone new, the absence of that calm reminds her of the one who had it. In the memory of someone who once felt deeply, composure becomes a symbol. It's not something she retells aloud. It's something she senses every time she's with someone who lacks it. The comparison doesn't come from intention. It comes from lived experience, and experience few can replicate, because it's not in the actions, but in the energy. Composure then transcends time. It doesn't age, it doesn't fade, and it doesn't get replaced easily. And if one day she thinks of you, it may not be because you ever said grand things, but because you were the only one who ever made her inner world feel quiet. 4. What if? The question that never left her. When a relationship ends, the clearest thing seems to be the ending itself. But an end in behavior doesn't always mean an end in thought. For many, especially those who once shared a deep emotional bond, separation does not slam the door shut. It begins a long journey of confronting unanswered questions. And among them, what if is one of the most persistent echoes within. She may have been the one to walk away. She may have decided there was nothing left to hold on to. But that decisive act often marks the start of a long thread of thought, difficult to control. As time passes and the initial surge of emotion settles, she begins to face the emptiness, not just the absence of you, but the loss of a feeling she once knew. That's when the questions begin to surface. What if I had slowed down? What if he hadn't gone silent? Would I have turned back? What if I had stayed? Would things have been different? These aren't questions meant to uncover absolute truth. They are the mind's attempt to understand what happened and why the emotions remained, even after the actions have ended. This inner conflict doesn't show itself outwardly. She can still smile, still go to work, still live her daily life. But in her quietest moments, when no familiar message lights up her phone, when a song stirs the past, those same questions return. She wonders whether her decision to leave came from clarity, or was merely a reaction to emotions she had yet to process. When a man lives with composure, not reacting impulsively to her departure, he leaves more than a void. He leaves a mirror. And in that mirror, she doesn't just see him. She sees herself. She sees the steadiness he carried, the calm in how he accepted reality, and the grounded presence he maintained without demanding attention or drama. That's what gives the question, what if, its growing weight. Because she begins to realize the peace you brought is not easily found elsewhere. And when new relationships lack the depth to replace what was lost, her mind instinctively returns to what once made her feel safe. The question becomes not a passing regret, but a quiet reflection on the choices that led her away from someone who might have been her home. She doesn't necessarily wish to return, but the very existence of the question shows that you never truly left her thoughts. Unspoken, these reflections surface like whispers, while rereading an old message never deleted, while unconsciously scanning her friend list for your name, or when someone mentions something that brings back how it once felt to be with you. The question, what if, needs no answer to exist. It lives as part of the internal reckoning, where she begins to see the full depth of what once was. And if you continue to live by your values, not trying to impress, not resisting or seeking attention, then each passing day becomes silent proof of what she once let go of, heavy in its quietness. Maturity is not the ability to forget. It's the strength to reflect. And in that process, the question, what if, becomes the bridge between the present and what has been lost. Not because you tried to inspire regret, but because your presence once ran deep enough to leave a true void, a space-time cannot fill, and no one else can easily replace. 5. Letting go is not weakness, it is supreme strength. In many situations, especially in personal relationships, letting go is often misunderstood as a sign of failure, surrender, or loss of control. Yet through the lens of one who governs himself, letting go ceases to be a retreat in weakness and becomes a clear demonstration of inner strength, a higher form of freedom and self-respect. When a woman chooses to leave, society assumes the man will chase, explain, and respond with intense emotion to prove the relationship's worth. But in reality, not all silence is submission, and not all who move on are indifferent. Some, instead of reacting on instinct, choose to pause, to step back in order to preserve their inner peace. Letting go in this case is not about ending a relationship with coldness, but about refusing to interfere in what lies beyond one's control. When a man does not chase, does not interrupt her decision, does not attempt to explain or reclaim her attention, it does not mean he no longer feels. On the contrary, it reveals he is strong enough to grant another person the freedom to choose, even if that choice excludes him. Letting go requires a high degree of self-command. Humans are often driven by the fear of loss. Holding on, even when incompatibility is clear, often stems from a desire to avoid the emptiness that follows. But the one who knows how to let go accepts that emptiness as part of the growth process. He does not seek to fill it with replacements, but lets it exist and learns to stand firm within it. In matters of love, a man's silence after separation may unsettle the woman who expected a different response. She may have braced for pleas, long messages, or at least a sign of regret. But when none of that arrives, only with dignity, she is faced with the unexpected. A man who does not need to be chosen to know his own worth. Human emotion is never simple, and in a relationship of depth, letting go does not mean the feeling has died. It may remain, but it is placed beneath principle and self-respect. The man refrains from reacting because he understands that anything forced against another's free will cannot endure. He does not fight to reclaim what has gone, because he believes what truly belongs will return, naturally and without coercion. Such letting go sends a message more powerful than any spoken word, that one can love deeply, yet still choose self-possession, that he does not need control over outcomes to feel whole, that his worth is not tied to being needed or retained. He walks away, not because he no longer cares, but because he honors himself too much to trade peace for temporary presence in another's life. In time, the one who left begins to grasp the meaning of that release. No more calls, no more demands, but also no more quiet strength, patient, steady, present, as before. And in the absence, the value begins to emerge. The strength of letting go lies in this. It needs no proof, nor does it rely on another's response. It is in itself a mark of maturity, of deep understanding of oneself and the nature of relationship. The one who lets go with composure does not abandon feeling. He simply refuses to lose himself in pursuit of what no longer resonates. 6. You don't react, you understand. In emotionally charged relationships, reaction is often mistaken for care. A distant message can provoke immediate rebuttal, demands for explanation. Sudden silence tends to trigger a flurry of actions, phone calls, texts, or attempts to recapture attention. But those who have mastered themselves understand not everything warrants a reaction. Sometimes the most appropriate response is none at all, not out of apathy, but from having understood enough not to be pulled into surface emotions. Apathy and composure are not the same. The apathetic care nothing for others' emotions. The composed, on the other hand, observe emotions, both theirs and others, without letting them dictate behavior. When a woman becomes distant or deliberately cold to create space, the typical response is panic, anger, or pursuit. But the man who holds inner stillness will not respond that way. He is not drawn into chaos. He does not react because he understands. He understands that not all behavior reflects true feeling. Many hide their care out of fear of being hurt. A woman may choose silence, not because her feelings are gone, but because she's wrestling with herself. She may act cold because it feels safer. In moments like this, impulsive reaction only widens the gap. His composure instead becomes a quiet signal that he is not ruled by emotion and mature enough not to require affirmation. Not reacting doesn't mean being unaware. On the contrary, he sees more clearly than most. He observes, he registers, but he doesn't let emotion drive his choices. He knows he cannot control someone else's feelings, nor force them to express what they aren't ready to face. So he doesn't try to fix the situation. He doesn't fill the silence with rushed words. He lets the space remain, because in stillness, truth often reveals itself most clearly. In a relationship that once held deep connection, understanding is essential. When the man does not respond to words or actions meant to rupture, it's not because he feels nothing, but because he knows emotion, no matter how strong, should not dictate how he lives. He chooses to observe, to accept, and to remain anchored in inner values, unshaken by external turbulence. This lack of reaction creates a sharp contrast. While others are pulled into emotional games, the one who stands firm becomes a point of reference. His composure, over time, sends a clear message. He doesn't need control to have influence. He doesn't need argument to be seen. He remains a pillar, not immediately understood but quietly unforgettable. She may never say it aloud, but she senses it. The difference lies in this. While many men react to prove themselves right, the composed man stays silent to preserve inner clarity. And that clarity, this wordless understanding, gradually makes her realize she is standing before someone unlike any man she's known before. In time, it is this very non-reaction that makes her reflect most. In his silence, she sees a mirror of herself, of her fears, her hiding, and all the unspoken truths. He doesn't need to ask questions, because he becomes the answer itself. A silent mirror that makes her face her own reflection. 7. Silent growth makes her look back. Some changes unfold without noise, without announcements, and without the need to be noticed. This is true maturity, quiet, persistent, born from a desire to live in alignment with one's values, not to prove anything to anyone. When a man grows in silence after a relationship ends, that very stillness becomes a mirror that compels the woman who once left to look back. Maturity is not a shift in speech or outward display. It shows in the small daily choice, in how he faces difficulty, how he upholds inner discipline, and how he reorders his priorities without applause or recognition. He doesn't change for anyone, nor to prove a point. He changes because he understands that one must not remain stagnant after loss. To keep evolving is the only way to preserve one's inner integrity. When she looks back, what she sees is not someone parading progress on social media or through others' accounts. She sees that he walked forward, quietly, with dignity, consistency, and without blame. And in that silence, combined with his continued growth, she begins to wonder, did she ever truly understand him? And was her decision back then rooted in clarity, or just a reaction to an unfinished version? Silent maturity holds a unique kind of influence. It doesn't inspire admiration through appearances, but commands respect from within. A respect born from witnessing someone live by their principles without needing validation. When a man keeps rising while remaining calm, it forces those who knew his former self to clearly see the contrast between before and after. She may have left at a time when he wasn't yet whole. Perhaps then he carried flaws, lacked strength, and wasn't capable of protecting the relationship properly. But with distance, she begins to see that the man she once knew has changed. Not because someone told her, but because every small sign reveals that he now lives with greater depth, clearer purpose, and is no longer driven by impulse as before. Nothing makes someone reflect more than seeing a person they once knew outgrow themselves, without leaning on anyone and without making noise. Maturity isn't measured in words, but in the consistency of actions. And when a man chooses quiet growth over attention, his presence becomes distinct, not because he transformed quickly, but because he was patient with every step. She sees this not through grand occasions, but in the smallest things. The way he now speaks with more calm, how he chooses his surroundings more carefully, how he no longer appears in the same conflicts that once drew him in. She sees a new version of him, not unfamiliar, but clearly past the version she once knew. And from that, a question forms in her mind. Did she lose someone who was becoming himself? Silent growth never asks to be recognized. And because of that, it carries more weight than any justification or promise. The man does not need to appear to explain his transformation. He lets his actions be the evidence. And if one day she happens to notice, it won't be because he tried to draw her attention, but because his unwavering behavior became the clearest signal of all. 8. The space you left behind, no one else can fill. After a relationship ends, it's common for each person to return to their own orbit. Life moves on. New routines take shape, and new people appear. Yet not all presence holds the same weight. Some people, when they leave, create a void that time cannot erase, and those who follow, no matter how good they may be successfully, cannot fill it in the same way. That void is not physical. It doesn't come from someone who was there every day or did grand gestures. The deepest absence comes from a feeling, the feeling of being understood, of being heard, of being with someone who didn't need to try to be special. It's the safety of being fully seen without needing to speak too much. A man who listened not to respond, but to understand, leaves a lasting imprint. His undemanding attention, composed responses, and mindful presence became a space where the woman could be fully herself or self. When those things are no longer there, no matter how polished new connections may seem, they fail to offer the same resonance. Because what was lost wasn't just a person, it was a rare state of connection. The difference between you and those who came after isn't in words or gestures. It lies in the nature of your presence. While others may try to impress, you were the one who never needed to. You weren't trying to be the highlight. You were simply yourself. And it was that honesty, that consistency, that made you irreplaceable. Once a woman has experienced that, she won't easily find it again and elsewhere. New conversations may be lively but lack depth. New attention may make her feel seen momentarily, but won't bring the same understanding. Gradually, she begins to realize that the void you left wasn't about action. It was the peace you carried with you. That void doesn't reveal itself immediately. It takes shape silently, in the everyday moments, when she needs someone to listen but is met with impatience, when she seeks refuge but finds only shallow reaction, when she begins to wonder why someone seemingly perfect still leaves her feeling incomplete. In those moments, your absence becomes the clearest form of presence. You don't need to return to remind her of this. Every comparison unfolds within her, not forced, not constructed. The space you left isn't something she recognizes with noise, but something she feels when someone else can't reach where you once stood. She begins to see that a relationship can end, but the impact of a true present soul does not fade so easily. That is why you don't need to cling to remain in her memory. You were there not by forcing your way in, but by arriving at the right time, in the right way, with steadiness, without judgment, without condition. And that created a unique space, not one easily occupied by another. Because what is truly real cannot be replaced by something merely superficial. In a world overflowing with replacements, depth will always distinguish itself. The space you left is not a wound. It is evidence, proof that sincere connection exists, and that when it disappears, its absence cannot be filled by the presence of just anyone else. 9. Her friends see what she doesn't dare to admit. In every relationship, especially those with depth, true emotions don't simply disappear because of a breakup. The person involved may try to hide, suppress, or deny what they feel, but those around them, those close enough to observe, can often see what even the person herself isn't ready to face. And for her, this is no exception. After leaving, she might seem fine, still cheerful in conversation, still attending gatherings as if nothing had happened. But real emotion doesn't always live in what's outwardly expressed. It often reveals itself through a glance, a pause in speech, a subtle shift when your name is mentioned, even by chance. Her friends, those who witnessed her time with you, are perceptive enough to notice it. They may not say anything immediately, but they see the change in how she reacts when someone brings up your name. A momentary stillness in her eyes, a half-hearted smile, or a quick shift in topic. All unconscious signals that something remains unresolved. True emotion can be blocked in speech, but it's difficult to suppress in reflex. Not everyone can mask their truth perfectly. The more someone tries to appear okay, the more they reveal subtle fractures in their emotional facade. She might claim it's over, that she's moved on, but her friends, especially those who know her well, will notice the disconnect between her words and the energy she carries whenever it's about you. It doesn't need to be spoken. It's already clear. Often, it's the closest friends who raise the first question. Not to pry or judge, but because they care and sense something unfinished. They see that even with a new relationship or renewed focus on work, something within her has not fully closed. And they understand that what remains unresolved still points back to one person: you. These close friends were also there during the earlier relationship. They remember what you did, how you showed up, how you listened, and how you never asked her to be anyone but herself. So when your absence proves irreplaceable, they notice, not through direct comparison, but by sensing the void that quietly persists within her. She may push back when asked, or avoid the topic altogether. That's not because she doesn't feel it, but because she's not yet ready to touch the truth. Admitting you are still on her mind means confronting a deeper question: was she right to leave? And that is a question that requires courage to face, something not everyone is ready for in the moment. Still, the truth doesn't vanish just because it remains unspoken. Her friends continue to observe, continue to catch the subtle signs, and understand that the feelings never truly left. She may stay silent, but they know from the things that need no explanation, know from the long pauses after a simple question: have you heard anything about him lately? The understanding her friends offer is not forceful, but quietly reflective, forming a mirror that gradually turns her inward. No one blames her for those feelings. No one demands a confession. But the silent presence of those who know her best becomes a gentle force, pushing her to confront what she's been trying to avoid: that you never really left her mind, even if she's never said it aloud. 10. You were her safe place, and no one can replace that. In every relationship, there is a kind of connection that rises above attraction, above romantic gestures or sweet words. It is the feeling of safety, a state in which, when beside someone, we don't need to guard ourselves, don't need to over-explain, and are still accepted just as we are. It's not a peace shaped by circumstance, but an inner calm that emerges in the presence of someone who does not judge, control, or harm. When a woman has once experienced that feeling, no matter how life changes afterward, it becomes an invisible standard for every relationship that follows. You were that kind of presence in her life, not the one who solved every problem, but the one who made her feel she didn't have to fight to be understood. And that freedom from effort became the most memorable part of all. You didn't need to make grand promises. You didn't need to be present all the time. But when you were, you didn't crowd her space. You created a zone of safety where she could be vulnerable without being judged, quiet without being abandoned, authentic without fearing loss of worth. That is not something everyone can offer. And when it's gone, the void it leaves is often deeper than anything else. Relationships that come after may bring novelty, but safety cannot be manufactured overnight. It takes patience, consistency, and the ability to listen with full presence. You once did all of that naturally, without force, without condition. And when she lost you, it wasn't just a person she lost, but a solid foundation she once leaned on. When the world outside becomes too fast, too loud, too demanding, people remember the place where they once felt enough. Not because that place was perfect, but because within it, they didn't have to strain to belong. In moments of fatigue or doubt, she begins to recall your presence, not because of anything extraordinary you did, but because you were the one person who never made her prove her worth to be seen. Safety is not detachment, nor is it control. It is acceptance paired with steadiness. You didn't try to change her, nor did you let your emotions be ruled by hers. You were the one who, regardless of the outside world, remained unchanged in how you treated her. And that gave her a sense of stability no one else could easily replicate. Your presence was where she turned after long, turbulent days. A message from you, a low-pressure meeting, or simply the way you listened in silence. These became her refuge, something she didn't have to fight to keep. And when that disappeared, she faced a hard truth. Safety cannot be replaced by loud affection or fleeting words. The difference is this: others might excite her, but you made her feel at peace. Others might create new experiences, but you made her want to come home. And when the world feels uncertain, the desire to return quietly overtakes everything the surface once promised. You don't need to remind her of your place in her life. You don't need to return to speak of the past. What you once did in silence, what you held with quiet conviction, was enough to establish a space no one else can occupy. And if one day she feels that everything seems right, yet something still feels missing, that missing piece is not you, but the feeling of being safe when she was with you. 11. Your presence was a lesson, not a promise. Some people don't enter another's life to stay forever, but their presence leaves a deep imprint, like a silent lesson that time cannot erase. They don't come with grand promises or lengthy commitments, but the way they live, steady, calm, and grounded, becomes a quiet reminder of something others have never offered. You were that kind of person in her life. You didn't promise to stay, nor did you claim to be the final destination. But in your presence, you were real. No performance, no embellishment, no display. You didn't seek recognition, yet every action and every gesture reflected exactly who you were. And that honesty became a lesson in value, in steadiness, in a kind of character she no longer finds easily. Without trying to teach, you left something that transcended words. She may not have realized it while you were near, but once you were gone, the comparisons began to form on their own. No one told her to compare, but the sense of absence surfaced each time she met someone new who failed to bring the calm, the safety, the depth that you once embodied. Your presence was an experience, and when an experience is strong and true, it often becomes a benchmark in the mind of the one who lived it. She doesn't label it an X, doesn't define it with any title, but she knows there was once someone who made her look inward, not through preaching, but through the way she lived and chose. Unlike those who make promises only to withdraw when they can't keep them, you made none. But you were there, the right way, at the right time, with full self-possession. You didn't build hope, you built value. And that value, because it depended on no one else, became the most enduring thing when all other promises faded. Your presence, in that sense, doesn't need to be retold, nor verified by others. But when she faces new disappointments, when she starts to understand that not everyone can stay calm in chaos, observe without reacting, listen without controlling, that's when you return. Not through messages, not through calls, but through the memory of someone who once showed her. There is another way to live, to love, to be, quietly and with strength. People often forget promises, but rarely forget a lesson. And lessons don't come from instruction, but from the lived experience of someone who embodied their truth with consistent action. You were that person. A silent but unforgettable lesson. A spiritual landmark that made her redefine connection and realize not all presence is created equal. The truth is, you don't need to be acknowledged to have mattered. She doesn't have to say how you impacted her. But you still remain in the choices she makes now, in the boundaries she no longer allows others to cross, in the way she knows that not everyone can make her feel seen and understood, through silence alone. Not because you were the most important, but because you were the only one who never tried to be anyone else. And that is precisely what makes you unforgettable. We cannot control who chooses to walk away, nor can we force others to recognize our worth at the right time. But what we can always control is how we respond. And that response defines the character of a man. I used to think I needed to explain, to hold on, to do something to prove I was worthy. But then I learned this: composure, not silence from pain, but silence from understanding one's limits, is the strongest response. When the need for validation fades, we begin to live by the principles we truly believe in. Practicing Stoicism doesn't mean being indifferent or cold. It means not losing yourself over things outside your control. When others choose to leave, you don't need to chase. When emotions arise, you don't need to suppress them. But you don't let them rule your actions either. Use your inner steadiness to keep moving forward, not to prove anything to anyone, but to become the most dependable version of yourself. Because eventually, the world will see. The one who never tried to be remembered is the one who is never forgotten. If you found this content meaningful, consider subscribe to the channel, and turning on notifications so you don't miss future insights. Because in the end, what makes someone truly irreplaceable is not how they tried to stay, but how they chose to leave, with great strength and without a single promise. See you in the next video.